My name is Viet Lei, and I am here representing Wutan Seattle. I'm here with two other Shifus, Matthew Stone down in Orting, as well as Shifu Dennis Mace in Bremerton, I believe.
Yep.
And I thought something that we could talk about today, because something that sort of we have all in common is that we all practice this art called Bagua, but we come from different lineages. And I thought that I would just start off by asking you guys if you guys could introduce yourself. And the main topic today would be talking about how you got interested into Bagua, what your lineage is, and what kind of practices, forms, jibengong, details of your practice, if you can share that with people. So,
Sounds good.
can everybody hear me?
Totally.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about Matt? How about you start first?
My name's Matt Stone. Been practicing martial arts for a little while. Um, I am currently a member of and representative of the Chen Pan Ling lineage, the Ling Pai family. I'm to my knowledge, the only one in Washington that has any connection to the family. I practice Jing Taiji and Bagua. Our Baguazhang is from Cheng Tinghua, Cheng Haiting through Chen Pan Ling, and then through his son to my teacher, and then to me. Yay. Um, I didn't get interested in Bagua necessarily. The very first teacher I had 40 years ago, Xingyi Taiji and Bagua were part of his curriculum to some degree. So it was a package deal, came with the bundle, and got into it from there, and have been working on it poorly ever since.
You know, you're humble to a fault. And everybody has had the chance to see Shifu Matthew Stone's videos on YouTube and seen him in competition. You know that he is certainly hiding more than he knows. So hopefully after this interview, I'll have some links in the show notes so you can see for yourself how skilled he is. Shifu Dennis Mace, can you briefly introduce yourself and your lineage?
Yeah, sure. I started martial arts in about 1982 with judo and jujitsu, and then I really wanted to be doing kung fu, and then I found out uh, about Matt and I actually shared the same first kung fu teacher, um, and that was about 1985 that I started doing Chinese martial arts with our first teacher. And um, my first introduction was seeing our teacher practicing Bagua off to the side one day. And I was immediately kind of caught because it was very different than anything else that I'd ever seen. And immediately I was like, what is that? I want to know what that is. Um, so years went by, became more fascinated with Bagua. Um, this was back in Omaha, and I ended up moving to Florida for about a year, and then came back to Omaha, moved out here to Washington State, moved to Seattle, and looked for Bagua teachers out here, and ended up going up to Vancouver to find. I was trying to find a more famous teacher, but happenstance took me in a different direction, and by random coincidence, destiny, kismet, whatever, I ended up finding Yang Tai, and and that's what I really stuck with ever since. And I gradually, over the years, I have just focused more and more on the Baguazhang. I mean, like Matt said, our mutual background, we were learning some synthesis of Shaolin and Xingyi and Taiji Bagua. Um, and But when I started training with Yang Tai, he was very old school, traditional um, uh, Chinese Beijing lineage, and that was that was it for me. And I've just been working on that and trying to deepened my practice into that ever since. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
I'll make my introductions short because I mean, you guys are the ones I want to ask more questions about. So, I'm part of this association with Han through Taiwan, and our Grandmaster Li Yunqiao, apart from studying Baji Chuan Piguazhang from the god of the spear Shenqiang Li Shuwen in his youth, his grandmaster had brought him to other areas of North China, and he was able to meet other teachers as well as participate in some challenge matches. And at least from what I've been told, he was beat up by two specific styles. And because of that, he took an interest in them and tried to study them. So one was Ding Zicheng, who did Six Harmony Praying Mantis, and the other one was Gong Baotian in Shandong. Gong Baotian was a student of Yin Fu, which is one of the two major families of Bagua. Usually in Bagua, we talk about people who do Yin Fu Bagua and Cheng Bagua. So Gong Baotian was a student of Yin Fu. Admittedly, Grandmaster Lu only studied Bagua for a year, and that has been a kind of a source of controversy as to how much he was able to learn from our end, because we admittedly hero worship Grandmaster Lu because he was already very skilled, so he was able to pick up all these skills, all these forms. But people on the outside are like, well, you guys really don't do Bagua, you do Baji Bagua, you do some mix of it. So um, admittedly, like even though I was able to inherit the curriculum, there's still a lot that I'm wanting to learn, right? I think to me, Chengsta Bagua is admittedly more popular than Yunfu Bagua. Yunfu Bagua to me is not as well defined, right? People teach in so many different ways, right? Um, could we maybe start off? I'm just going to kick the ball a little bit. What do you find are foundational practices in your Bagua systems? Maybe we can find something in common. Maybe we can talk about certain things that distinguish it. But what do we feel are key practices? Not talking about forms yet, just key, maybe jibengong, key practices in your Bagua lineages. Anybody can
Chris,
start.
why don't you go first, man? You're the specialist.
Well, as far as basics with Bagua, a lot of the basics that Yang Shifu would have us do were there was a lot of the Fuju Gongfa, the supplemental exercises that we would do a lot of. There was a lot of conditioning and partner training. Some of it was partner conditioning and some of it was partner skill set training, applications, and there was always, you know, strategically, I mean, evasion is one of the aspects of Bagua that people talk about, but evasion isn't just like, you know, a lot of people just think of Bagua and think of evasion, but it uses a lot of interception and like in Jikundo's interception, but it also the emphasis that Yang Shifu always drilled into us was maintaining this kind of stability with the footwork that you don't see very much in a lot of other kinds of Bagua, and focusing on moving from your center line and targeting your opponent's center line, which is also distinct, I think, compared with other schools of Bagua. Most of the time, most schools of Bagua, whether it's Yinfu, Cheng, Tinghua's Bagua, Liang Bagua, the different branches, most of them have this kind of like off-center, offside kind of a movement. But with the lineage that we came from with Cheng Tinghua's background, was from Lubin. And there was all the kind of evasion, but it's all very kind of centerline focused and moving from kind of like a crouching stance and drilling in through someone while you're sidestepping, moving through them to throw them on their head or whatever. So it's a little bit more aggressive, I think, than some other schools of Bagua that I've seen, but also a lot more centered and rooted. So as far as like the basics of movement, everything, Yang Shifu always focus on this kind of like moving from the inside. He would, his broken English, like try to explain the importance of developing connective tissue or fascia, in his Beijing accent, he called it more, and the importance of that. And his ideas, he would explain that what yijing is like muscle tendon change. A lot of people equate that to like a set of forms, which are like standing qigong forms, but to Yang Shifu it was a whole principle of training, which was really different for me, and it really caused kind of a paradigm shift in my perspective about kung fu and training in general. So instead of this idea of just like doing a bunch of forms, Yang Shifu's focus on Bagua, it's very principle heavy and strategy heavy, and the forms are really more like conditioning practices to help your body transform so that you have more capacity to apply the art. And the forms are really kind of like kind of progressive and changeable, because the whole idea behind Bagua is changing, adaptability, transformation, sui ji yin bian, follow, gauge, transform, respond. Like everything is all just this interaction of with your opponent and transforming. It's a very Taoist idea of blending with nature and not really conflicting with your opponent, but the idea of like following, blending, connecting, overcoming, and changing. So kind of a long-winded
Well, let's maybe we can further sort of go into this a little bit. Is there any sort of Xingyi influence when you talked about directness and going from one center to another? I think we've all seen this YouTube clip of there was a Bagua match, I think in Taiwan, and first things first is the person starts to put his hands out like this and starts circling around, and I think a lot of people from not coming from kung fu backgrounds like, is that really how Bagua fights? Just walking around the whole time. So what you said about moving from your center to someone else's center sounds to me not something that I typically think of as Bagua. It's like, oh, that sounds like Xingyi. That sounds like, maybe like even a Wing Chun concept.
Yeah.
Is there any Xingyi influence in Liu Bing's Bagua, or, sometimes these arts are practiced side by side?
Yeah, I think so. My perspective, and I mean, we always hear about this with, Xingyi Bagua practitioners, and it mostly comes from Cheng because he had an open door and trained with a lot of Xingyi guys. But, even coming from like a judo jiu-jitsu background, like center line is super important, right? For like Shuaijiao, and Cheng was a Baoding Shuaijiao expert and also Mongolian Shuaijiao. So before he started to train with Deng Haichuan. So I think that was already baked into his Bagua, but also because he had this open door policy with training with a bunch of other martial artists. A lot of them at the time were Xingyi guys. And so, I think that's one of the things that drew a lot of the Xingyi masters to Cheng Tinghua, because they can see that Bagua has this kind of principle in the application and the movement. And sorry, my cat.
I was like, oh my God, that's a ghost. That sounds, I was like, oh, look, his Bagua's working even behind him right now.
Yeah,
He's creating forces.
Yangshu just walked in through the room. So, um, but I think uh, there was kind of a recognition, and the similarities between Xing and Bagua don't only come from a synthesis of training. I think there's a lot of similarities in the basic root of the practice of the systems. Xingyi's main kind of the way that they attack with the Qixingbu, the kind of angular stepping, is very similar to the way that Bagua moves when it enters and intercepts an attack. You're moving in and through an opponent and sometimes kind of around them, but you're enveloping them, right? So this whole kind of idea of blending with an opponent and connecting, I think it's really inherent in both systems. It's just Xingyi is a little bit more angular. A lot of people say linear, but it's really angular, right? To be more specific, right?
I like that distinction that you made.
Yeah, yeah.
Almost
It's
like
more.
tangential
Yeah,
to a circle. Right?
exactly. That's really important because it's not Xingyi doesn't work in 90-degree angles. It's more like 70, 30-degree angles and like wedging. And Bagua has a similar concept, but it especially the Bagua that I learned with Yang Shifu, it's that kind of angling, but you're entering completely through an opponent. And that's why, like when I see Baji applications, I'm like, whoa, that's just like the Bagua that we did, like the entering, like angling and entering through someone and completely like steamrolling, kind of like digging under their root and dumping them and crushing them. That's very similar with the way that the Bagua that we learned. Like the first palm, like there's some people call it Dingshi Bajang, the big, the little 8 palms or the basic 8 palms. Yang Shifu just called them little 8 palms, the Xiaobajang. That's what he called them. And the first one that you learn is a downward crushing palm. So with a downward crushing palm, a lot of people when they do the posture, they're standing like this with their hands like this, but that's not really functional, honestly. If everything opens and is rounded, you're kind of angling more forward a little bit, and just that shift and the angles and the practice, it kind of changes a lot of the focus because the real intent, like the hidden meaning behind the downward crushing palm, is focusing on your hips and targeting your opponent's hips, whether you're striking them or destroying the root. That's the real essence of downward crushing palm, is you're targeting your opponent's hips, whether you're throwing or striking or whatever, the hip structure. And that's the real essence of downward crushing palm, but that's also the foundation of everything else in Bagua. That's why you learn that one first, and that's why it's the most important. Because once you learn how to destroy someone's hip structure, everything else is literally spinning off of that, right? That's the whole root. And from a grappling perspective, in Chen Tinghua's grappling, that's the first most important rule: control your opponent's center. But it's not just centers; you're controlling their hips, right? Sumo, Mongolian wrestling, Shuaijiao, Baoding, Shuaijiao, it's all controlling your opponent's spine and their hips. And so that's why the downward crushing palm is the most important in the first that you learn. And so as far as like how that relates to Xingyi Chen, it's really, how you're angling into an opponent, right? But there's still, Xingyi there's a similar kind of a wedge and striking as you're overturning someone, dumping them, and then pounding the shit out of them when they're on the ground, right? Bagua is similar in that you're kind of wedging into someone, but you're usually throwing them like on their head or their tailbone while you're breaking something and then stomping on them as you go and break his buddy's neck right next to you, right? So it's this continuum, right? It's like taking that kind of evasive angling and entry that you see in Xingyi And Bagua is using that like on a 360-degree spectrum where you're dealing with not just one person, but many. And that's what, a lot of people say Bagua is for dealing with multiple opponents, and then they just don't understand why. And your example of Bagua dude trying to fight by walking a circle around someone, like that whole perspective is maybe one of the fastest routes to a long dirt nap, right? That it doesn't work that way. That's not what the circle walking is for. The circle walking is to learn how to corner an angle and move in and develop this kind of core power where you're developing your center line and your ability to enter and throw, right? And all these kind of strikes and throws where you're twisting from your root, right? And that's what the circle walking is for. It's not walking around an opponent. That's ludicrous. Really, that'll get you killed. It's really stupid. It doesn't work that way. So
I did it in a tournament once.
How does that compare to your practice of Bagua, Shifu Stone, or your understanding of Bagua? Are there similarities?
Yeah, like, and Dennis and I talk a lot, and it's my perspective on it is that I don't think Jingyi and Bagua are necessarily all that dissimilar.
right.
I think, I think all martial arts are the same. What distinguishes one style from another style is the mentality in the application of specific technical techniques. I was looking for a better word. A punch is a punch, a kick is a kick. I'm extending my upper limb, I'm extending my lower limb. There is an absolute finite number of ways to do that. How do I deploy my weapon to the target? And so in my head, I kind of see Jingyi as being like fighting in a hallway. Well, Bagua can fight in a hallway too. Right. The difference is the Jingyi guy is just going to charge down the hallway. He wants to run you through the hallway. I want that 2 foot by 2 foot square piece of real estate that you're standing on. I'm going to own it, and I'm going to blow through you to get it. Bagua has the exact same goal. I want you out of my hallway, but it's not going to approach it with quite the same mentality. And I love the way Dennis says, the circle walk is about cornering. When I learned from my current teacher, Shifu John Scott in Frederick, Maryland, I came to him with like 30 years of background. And so he told me very flatly, he's like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with basics on you. And so what he did is we're working on forms, we're working on individual techniques, and he would just hammer, hammer, hammer all the minor, tiny details. And then I'd ask questions, and it's kind of it's something I absolutely adore about him. He'd go, "Oh, you're a deep thinker. Get back to work." He's not a conversationalist. He's do the work. And so, like Dennis says, it's Bagua is about taking that center line. Yeah, so is Jingyi, so is Wing Chun. They're all about taking the center line because we are all concerned about taking the center line. If you can control the head, the neck, the spine, the hips, you control everything. Now, how do we control that spindle? Well, we can play with their arms, we can play with their legs, we can grab an arm and a leg simultaneously. A lot of ways to do it. So with specific Bagua training under my teacher, and then what I do personally, I don't spend a lot of time doing circle walking. I think that personal opinion is a means by which you test a student's resolve.
Like standing,
Say again?
Like standing in a horse stance.
Yes. I mean, does it have a purpose in training? Absolutely, it does. Is it a focal point of training? Absolutely not. Holding a singular posture and walking a circle, it will develop structure. But it's like Zanzhuang, there are people that are like, oh, I do post standing for an hour. Why? 10 minutes in, you've got the benefits. You don't need to do an hour. If you're talking about doing circle walking for structure training, structure evaluation, sure. So what I'll do is I'll just do more steps in between each section of the form. And I'll focus, as my teacher would yell at me, because I did not come to him with the best body methods, the best structure, the best whatever. And he would just tweak infinitesimally small details. And so when you're doing the form, it's really apparent that there is a unification of movement straight down. Yeah, I might start the form and have a turning approach, but if you try to do sections of the form linearly instead of doing them on a circle, it's immediately apparent. I confront, what was it Bruce said? Not to change any camera angles. I'm confronting the opponent here. How did I get here? Is the camera, the person looking at me this way? Or is the camera looking this way and I've stepped around? I'm still going to go through that middle piece. See, hallway fighting, I'm coming mostly from the front. Baguazhang is a little bit more open-minded in my mind. It's like, sure, front, you bet. Or there's all that space behind them. Why not get back there? And so doing the form, doing circle walking, I like making my training partners, I hate calling them my students, I have them do Kobu Baibu over and over again to get used to that constant stepping so that when they're confronted, it's really easy for them to turn into it or to corner around it to change that angle. At the end of the day, I think they're all very much the same though. Same end goal is there. It's how we get to it. I think that was almost
coherent. No, two important things that I'd like to kind of springboard into that would be one, you talked about how because you had some background already that didn't waste your Shifu didn't waste maybe waste is not as a
did not invest
didn't spend a lot of time with quote unquote basics, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe used your basics already and just further refined them,
yeah.
right?
Which is a bit of a Bagua tradition, right?
Yeah, and that I think that would lead to this notion that sort of Bagua is somehow a higher style or a finishing style. Oftentimes, people don't train pure Bagua, right? People usually come from some kind of background, right?
Yeah.
And also application-wise, sometimes Bagua application seems sort of higher level. But the way that the both of you have sort of broken it down in terms of application, at least the theory behind it, seems immediately graspable, right? It doesn't seem too otherworldly. Look, get to the person's center, make sure that they're blending with each other. That all makes sense to me, right? Not something that I can't that I think, oh my gosh, that's otherworldly. I can't imagine what that must be like, right? So very interesting.
Because there's a lot of mystification on all three of the internal arts, right? Xingyi, Taiji, Bagua, there's all this magical thinking applied to them. And these myths grow up out of that kind of approach. And if you don't have an instructor that breaks it down and goes, no, this is all this is. When we talk about uprooting someone's center, what are we really talking about? We're talking about leverage. None of it is magical. It's just understanding the intersection of one body with another, and then how that technique actually functions. And I think a lot of people have good training, but too little putting hands on another human to see, how does this really work? A lot of theory, they do a lot of forms, and that's great. That's how we preserve it and continue it. But until they're touching arms, until they're grabbing another human to manipulate them in space, then it's just a lot of talk, a lot of mouth boxing.
Which I think, in a lot of ways, that's what the internal arts are known for. There's a lot of keyboard kung fu. If anything, people don't even talk to each other in person anymore. People will write comments online and comment on YouTube videos. That's what it's devolved into.
Right? Well, and Xu Xiaodong has kind of highlighted and underscored that.
For sure.
So that was one of the things that I wanted to kind of touch on too. Like you mentioned about a lot of people have this perspective about Bagua being like a graduate level martial art. And, that comes from when Deng Haichuan started teaching in Beijing. He taught other martial arts when he was there, but the people that he taught Bagua to were experts in something else, like the pretty wide variety. There was like 80 some disciples, right? That's listed on the tombstone. And out of all the people that Deng Haichuan ended up teaching, there's 82 disciples. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of people with a lot of backgrounds that held this in high regard. But my point is like Bagua really does take the foundation of what someone practices, and that's one of the things that was really apparent, especially when I was learning from Yang Shifu, is that it is a little bit more refined kind of principles and strategies. Principles for meaning like body structure, alignment, development, and literally, to use a Bagua pun, make it more well-rounded, right?
Right. I like how you snuck that in there. That's good.
So,
that's good.
Right. So
Bagua you saying that, the sneaking it in there.
It needs to be a T-shirt.
It's like there's always a circular argument, right? So, but
Can we buy tickets to your show?
No. So really, I actually think, coming to Seattle. So part of Bruce Lee's background when he came to Seattle, he came from Wing Chun, but he was also training other martial arts on the side, kind of in secret, But when he got here to Seattle, he was training with Fuk Young, his uncle, right? And Fuk Young trained a martial art that he called Red Boat Wing Chun, which is really an amalgamated martial art that included Xingyi Bagua, Taiji, Hungar, Southern Mantis. Like there's a lot of Southern Mantis. There was it was a hodgepodge of a lot of different martial arts. And I think that had a big influence on Bruce Lee that not a lot of people talk about, but is real. Like people that knew Bruce, like Jesse Glover talked about it. He knew Fuk Young, and because he would go and train with Bruce with Fuk. And, this is where I think Bruce it was almost like validation for practicing and combining other martial arts, because this kind of purity test in a lot of traditional martial arts were, I only train this system and that system. But every traditional martial art comes from a synthesis with something else, with the interjections of one expert, one master. He takes like Taiji, Cannon Fist, and Shaolin, and like some other stuff with his own kind of ideas, and then you have Taiji Chuan, right? And all the different variations of it. And Bagua, this is also why Bagua is so different from one teacher and practitioner to the next, because the root of Bagua is this integration of principles, right, and strategies. And the common thread is this idea of blending and these concepts and the circle walking. And, the circle walking is a practice. It really, there's different theories. Different people say it comes from a kind of meditative practice. It's kind of like a Taoist version of the Sufi whirling dervishes, right?
You can just on your last point to us.
Yeah. So I was kind of rambling about circle walking, and the real essence of it is about learning how to corner force, and it's also to develop this kind of core kind of twisting power in the body, a coiling power that develops connective tissue. And it's also for learning continuous movement, continuous motion, never breaking strength. always keeping connection. So similar to Taiji in that regard, right? Maintaining this kind of continuous movement. So it's very Taoist in perspective, but the physical training aspect of it is developing this kind of whole body coiling twisting that so that you can kind of express it when you need to strike or throw or it's you know physiologically fascia connective tissue, it's all braiding in the body, so you're really just kind of emphasizing that kind of spiraling effect in the body by doing the bagua practice. And that's why also when I show our school's version of the circle walking to different bagua practitioners, they usually it like lights turn on, because a lot of times everyone is used to doing this kind of circle walking where they're extending sideways towards the center, but their actual center is going this way. But when you actually twist your center line into the center of the circle, it creates this kind of like a dog chasing its tail effect. But that feeling means your whole body has connection and coiled power. Without it, you're kind of learning bad habits physically, physiologically, by doing like techniques and like just moving this way without having the coil. The power is missing, and it's a real simple little tweak. But by focusing on that coil, everything starts to connect in the body, like in a Taiji way, right? You're focused, like the whole point in Taiji with the continuous movement is creating this whole body connection with lines of force. It's the same thing that you're doing with doing Janzhuang for a long time. You're creating this relaxed structure and line of force, but with Bagua, you're doing it while moving and creating this continuum, right? That's one of the main aspects of Bagua is there's the circularity, there's a continuous motion. Like these are a couple of the foundational aspects of what Bagua is really about, right? So
I hear like these keywords like ning chuan, right?
race, right? Exactly. Juan,
So
Ning, Ning twisting, coiling, and Juan turning, Ning twisting, like wrapping, right?
or almost like rending.
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you get that image.
Yeah. Mo, Shenjiang, like grinding body palm. It's that like a axle, like twisting, right? So that's one of the Ding Shi Bajang, or the little eight palms, is that kind of twisting and coiling. So
And see, that's why one of the reasons I say, my opinion, nothing more than that, that Jing and Bagua, they're the same thing. It's a mentality of application. Because with the compression expansion of Xingyi, most of that compression comes with a coiling. It's
right.
not just down, out, down, out. It's
Right.
down and twist and
Right.
wrap and then expand outward. It's all of that at the same time. Taiji, the arms are an expression of the core. Well, and to get just the core moving, it's this constant twisting, this gut wrenching to get the core to move, and then we just let the arms kind of follow like seaweed in water. So what's the difference? Well, Jingyi wants to blow through your face. Taiji wants to get up close and bump you. And Baguazhang's going to walk around you and hit you from any possible line they can. They don't care. But all of them are 360-degree spheres because none of them are solely, Jingyi is portrayed as being just this straight line arrow, except it's not, because when you look at how Pichuan is an over the top, so it's very much this kind of a angle, right? And Chuan is underneath and uprooting, and Bongchuan is straight through the middle. And then the limitations of that frontal wedge, Palchuan is coming up and corkscrewing upward and outward to uproot, and Hongchuan is coming up from the top and down from a side to fold over. So it's all very 360. A lot of people, I don't think, again, because they don't put hands on someone, not in anger, in training. Uh, but they start wondering, well, how does this work? The first school that Dennis and I were in, when we did splitting pole, it was straight. It wasn't up and down. And that was one of the first things with my teacher, Shifu Scott, that she said, okay, show me what you know. I have never felt so embarrassed in my life because I did Peachon, and immediately he goes, what was that? And then he spent the next 2 hours working on me to get and back, up and back. And he was not kind about it. He was. I love the man. He's a very, very nice man. But he was ruthless and relentless in making sure that I understood that all five are different for a reason. Um, I lost the plot. Okay, sorry. Head
I
injuries.
kind of want to, maybe switch gears just a tad, but still a related topic. And I don't know if you guys will agree or not, but at least coming from when I've talked to other people, certain styles like Baji and Xing Chuan, the reason why practitioners felt it was a benefit to learn something like Bagua Zhang, uh, why were they ready to welcome those practices, those teachings, even though they had already practiced the style for a long time? Um, this might sound seemingly controversial, but it's almost like when you've been training in these certain styles, you hit the ceiling. And somehow Bagua is able to let you overcome that ceiling, right? And I don't know what is it about the training or maybe more principle based, right? But there's something about Bagua itself that is almost like a vitamin or a steroid or something. It makes your kung fu better, right? And I wonder how you guys might speak to that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I think it really dials down to the spirals. Like even in training itself. I mean, you know, like not to get too deep and philosophical here, right? But we're on this planet in a solar system, that's spinning around in the Milky Way, which is also spinning, right? So you have all these, you know, um, helixes and coils, and Bagua is really about a continuum, right? It's a spiraling continuum constantly moving forward, like the solar system going around the Milky Way, right? Like time itself, it doesn't stop. And that's the thing about the training in Baguazhang. You're constantly pushing yourself into pushing yourself to the edge of your capacity to continue growing, right? Physically, but that also, you know, everything else goes with it, mentally, emotionally, martial arts, part of the internal work with martial arts is psychological, it's physiological, right? You end up digging up your shit, right? If you have trauma in your past, that's going to come up. That's part of the aspect of internal training, right?
I snicker because as much as Shifu Mace is a healer and spiritual, I cannot deny the fact that he's still from Omaha and he's very earthy.
Yeah, yeah,
You have to dig up your own shit.
yeah,
Deal with
yeah, exactly. It gets nasty. Yang Shifu literally used to tell us, like when we first started training, like when we start training Bagua, what Yang Shifu would say the right way is compared to what we were all doing before, which is kind of, he would say mumu haha or half-assed kind of Bagua, right? It changes you from the inside. Like you start to sweat, your sweat stinks, like your stool changes colors, like all kind, you get emotional about stupid stuff, it doesn't make sense, like stuff comes up, right? But coming back to the training, what you talked about, this constant development, that's really the root of Bagua. It's principle based, so it creates this continuous, endless cycle of growth, right? And that's one of the beauties of it. There's no fixed state, like one of Bruce Lee's better quotes is, um, change is the changeless state, right? And that's so Bagua, right? Right? It's
It
like,
doesn't sound very Wing Chun or doesn't sound very Wing Chun to me, kind of.
right? To change is a changeless state. I mean, that's Bagua, you know, like that, you can kind of sum Bagua up into that, you know, that statement really.
And
So,
I think that's why Bhagavatam accelerates somebody's understanding, right? Because how many, not going to name names, but how many people have we known personally who study different styles, Japanese, Okinawan, Indonesian, Chinese, doesn't matter, and they've reached a great degree of skill, but their thinking is capped,
yeah.
and there are ideas and principles that I don't want to say escape them. They're capable of it, but their training doesn't encompass it. I love Xingyi. Taiji is my favorite. But there are things that Xingyi and Taiji don't really present to you, where Bagwazang is just so open about all of it that when you become exposed to that, it is very mind opening because you go, oh, look at all these possibilities. Look at this, look at that. Xingyi, for the most part, is all fist, 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 fist. Taiji, you really don't see in Taiji forms strikes because it's kind of a up close, throw them around kind of a thing. Bagwazang, well, you got strikes, you got throws, you got all of it. No, you just have limbs doing things. And you're forced to ask questions that you might not otherwise have been compelled to ask. If you're doing zingy shapes and you're like, ah, oh, tiger, rawr, you have a principle of redirection and overcoming, but to what degree is someone opening their mind to how that really works? Dennis made a comment about Jing doesn't really have 90 degrees. It doesn't. It doesn't, not in practice, until you open your mind and you go, oh, but wait, why am I only here? Why am I not also here? Why am I not also here? And until you are forced to open your mind, which I think Bagua does from the outset, to a more comprehensive worldview, then you don't put it all together. And I think once you do, then you see the connectivity between all of these different methods, and it breaks down. Why do we have people like Sun Lutang and Chen Pan Ling and other people who studied all of these, and then they have this synthetic, syncretic resulting product because they get to that capstone and everything bleeds together at that point. And it's really hard to say which part is which. Was that the Jingyi influence? I don't know. It's move, hit them, do the thing. Um,
I'd like to piggyback off of what Matt was saying, and one of the things that reminded me of is, and we haven't really mentioned it, but when you look at the Bagua forms, right? They're they call them palm changes because they're basically just complex ways of changing direction and walking the circle and the continuum. But those forms, when you look at Bagua forms are kind of like the interstitial movements between the techniques that you see in other martial arts forms. Like if you look at karate forms, Shaolin forms, Xingyi forms, the Bagua techniques, because of the coiling and circularity, it's like all the intermediate movement in the techniques in the forms, in the palm changes. And it's like, it helps you from that. I kind of view that as kind of an intermediate level in understanding martial arts, is taking those breakdowns of forms and understanding the in-between pieces that are kind of like the hidden techniques, right? So, where you have the transitional movements, where, you have, I don't know, like you pick any kind of Kung Fu form, whether it's Wing Chun, karate, whether it's like any Shaolin form, like it's the in between pieces where you have like a, I don't know, you just have like a basic block and a punch, right? Bagua is like what's happening in here, right? In between this and this, like Bagua is all the pieces in between. It like fills in the gaps, right? From an intermediate kind of level and understanding martial arts, just from a forms perspective, I think that's what like, because if you look at the Bagua forms, it's like, single change palm. Like there's so many versions and variations. This is another point why Bagua is so different from branch to branch, is because it's all about principle and adapting movement. So like some versions of the single palm change are just this kind of like a like coil turn, overturn, and split, right? That's all transitional movement in every other like system, right? Some like the upper body movement, so single change palm, like what we do is that like there's like a even like the closing gate, wrapping elbow, lazy dragon, laser cross gate, capture from horseback, and then you have wild goose loose flock, and then green dragon stretches claws, right? This is all the interstitial movements, the connecting movements in all the other martial kung fu forms, like all the in between pieces, and that's also why with Bagua, like Yang Shifu, like the way he would teach those palm changes would change based on who he was teaching or a kind of application that he was emphasizing, right? So that's why we ended up with all these like different variations of the same palm change, and why it was always funny to me. A lot of my classmates wouldn't get it. Even Bagua students wouldn't get it. It's like, why is he always changing the forms? What's Bagua about? Right? It's about change. It's not static. It never is static. It's always changing. And that's why Bagua always changes. Like as we grow, we're constantly moving, but we're getting older. Like I can't do the shit that I could do when I was 20, 30, even 40 years old, and in my 50s.
Well, you're not 40? No.
No. Why, thank you. No, so it changes with us, and it's because it's about adapting, right? And even the way that you practice from one day to the next, not only is it okay for it to be different, it should be, because you should be growing, you should be changing, you should adapt. Like maybe one day you have an injury or an illness that you're working around, you still practice, but you do it different, right? You change, you adapt, even to your own struggle, even to your own sickness, even to your own injury, you adapt something functional, something useful, right? So it constantly changes. Even as we get older, we can still improve in one way, shape, or form, right?
So Bagua just seems so iconoclastic, right?
Yeah, totally.
Focus on fixed postures. Here you're moving from the very beginning.
Right.
Whereas instead of focusing linear, you're focusing on circles. Instead of focusing on the end movement, right? So especially in body Chuan, we focus on single movements, danjiao, and thinking that we're going to basically, one time we do this and it's going to make the person fly back. You guys are focusing on transitions, right?
Right. Exactly.
It is such like kind of the rock star, bad boy, badass of Chinese martial arts. And it's even though it came out later,
right,
it has blossomed into so many branches, so many dedicated practitioners. Arguably, it's one of the more popular styles in other predecessors, right?
Yeah.
Kind of going, because you talked about forms. I'm surprised you brought up this point, not me, because I love forms.
I know.
Let's talk about a little bit about curriculums.
Right.
So, we kind of, let's move aside from talking about jibengong, but into the actual forms themselves. Oftentimes people will say, I practice a singular Bagua form and say that I have the system. And then there are those individuals that have invested a lot of time into huge systems, right? For example, like Gao style Bagua is huge, right? It's still a Cheng derivative. So
right.
I was wondering if the both of you could speak to the systems that you practice, right? What forms are in your curriculum? Maybe Matt, we can start you first.
So in Lingyan Pai, we have uh, a single uh, empty hand form, Swimming Dragon Bagua. Then we have a double sword form, we have a staff form, and a couple other derivative forms. We have a deer horn knife form. Um, it's not it's not a huge number of forms. And then you take a chunk of the form and then you drill it down. Okay, we're going to work on just this piece over and over again. Get the body movement right. Um, but I think, and this is again my personal opinion solely. This does not reflect on my teacher or my lineage. Um, Chen Pan Ling collected a lot of material over his lifetime. He trained with, as the family says, Cheng Tinghua and Cheng Haiting. Timeline wise, probably not so much with Cheng Tinghua at all because it just doesn't overlap properly. Whatever. And then he learned Jingyi from Li Cunyi, and Li Cunyi and Cheng Haiting were friends. So, and I don't know how much time he spent with either one of them. I do know he spent more time with Li Cunyi than he did with Cheng Haiting. Um, so I'm not sure how much time he had to collect more forms, if more forms were being used. Uh, Despite Lingman Pai having a lot of forms, the training mentality, training orientation isn't one of I need a whole bunch of forms. It's, am I communicating the essential elements of what I want you to train in this form? And something Dennis had brought up a second ago sparked something in my mind where, with my opinion, Jingyi and Taiji, each posture, each individual movement is just a training piece. Like it's not, I don't think they're intended to be this technique. If this happens, then you do this. I think it's because he was talking about the coiling and whatever, and I got to thinking about how we do diagonal flying. And we do diagonal flying with this compression and this turning, and very much the core squeezes down so that we can then express up and out, you know. And I think when you look at forms that have postures, and I hate the word posture because it implies to my mind some degree of static practice. It's not living, it's not flowing. But I think those static postures are all individual training things to teach something. The expression of it then, especially with Taiji, because Taiji has the eight principles, right? Bafa. Okay, cool. Well, then why do I need, in Chen Pan Ling style, why do I need 99 postures in my form? If there's only eight, do eight. Well, because they're different expressions of those ideas. So with our Swimming Dragon form, the empty hand Bhagavad form, each of the eight sections addresses, to my mind, like Dennis said, a different type of coiling, different type of principle, how to use different body parts in different ways. The third section turns in toward the center of the circle. The fourth section turns toward the outside of the circle. The whole form is like that, where there's all these opposites, and it's very much a training program. Um, so we really don't have a ton of forms. We have the eight mother palms, we have the Swimming Dragon empty hand, Swimming Dragon double gen, uh, Swimming Dragon staff. They're all called Swimming Dragon. I don't know why. So it's different progressions.
Like that totem, that metaphor.
Yeah,
YOLO.
yeah. Um, so I think it's different aspects. When I'm doing double sword, is it double or is it single? Is it one hand, two hand? I think there's a lot of applicable principles and a lot of, dare I say, change included in that. Um, because when I'm using staff, well, is it staff or is it spear? Okay, what am I hitting you with? So we really only have kind of a handful, a tight package of forms to train.
But enough.
I think so.
Yeah.
Shifu Mace.
So curriculum that Yangzhu shared I mean, he would start with what he called the xiaobajang, the little eight palms, and that was a setup for um, the bamujang, the eight mother palms. And in there's also a number of different weapon forms, and he also taught the 64 palms, which is a really cool synthesis of Xingyi and Bagua. I learned those and have since forgotten them. I just find it kind of superfluous. A lot of people that might be potential students would probably be disappointed, but it's just too much extra that I appreciate, but don't have the time to train, and I don't really care. Um, there's a bunch of weapons forms that Yang Shifu taught. I learned a lot of the applications of, and don't really remember a lot of the forms themselves. I remember the principles and the applications, how the weapons work, which was really awesome, which I try to emphasize more. And but the way that I have kind of broken down the way that I teach the Bagua forms in a curriculum is I'll teach a basic version of the little eight palms, and then I'll teach an intermediate version, which I'll call uh, like a, like a connecting set of the little eight palms, but they are um, more complex palm changes as you do the form. So there's more techniques, and I'll teach multiple different variations of the palm changes so that all the different principles that Yang would teach get kind of hardwired, and those become the foundation for learning the big eight palms or the eight mother palms. Yang Shifu would kind of interchange he would call them either the Dabajang or Bamujang, the big eight palms or eight mother palms. And the system that we practice itself, it's interesting. Matt, a lot of their forms are called Swimming Dragon, but Yang Shifu would teach that the system that we practice from Cheng Tinghua, Lu Bin, Lu Shikui, which is Lu Bin's son. Then Xu Jinbiu was one of Liu Shikui's disciples, and Xu Jinbiu, after Liu Shikui died, he continued training with Wang Wengui. Wang Wengui was one of or probably Lu Bin's top disciple, and Xu Jinbiu was my teacher's teacher. Yang Guotai trained with Xu Jinbiu for something like, God, it's like 40 or 50 years. And I just for me personally, like I am not as good at remembering a lot of the forms. I'm much better at remembering how the shit works and the principles that underlie them, right? That what sticks in my head. I have like a kind of a form of dyslexia. So like I remember the details and the distance and concept and feeling and but memorizing the forms like I am just really horrible at that. And you, Viet, like I am mind blown at the encyclopedia that you like. It's like, how in the hell do you do it? Like Southern Mantis, eight-step Mantis, like all the Baji forms, Bagua forms, Xingyi forms, Taiji forms. Like I'm like in awe. Like my brain doesn't work that way, but I think it's amazing. Like holy shit! Like it's pretty.
Absolutely.
Um, um, and from my own practice, I do a lot of basics and Fuju Gongfa. There's a lot of body conditioning. Yang Shifu would emphasize a lot of he would call it like Bagua iron body training. A lot of conditioning with partners and against walls and trees, and it's kind of cool because there was just a video that the karate nerd Jesse
Jesse and Kim.
and Camp just shared, And it's interesting because one of the things I love that the Shaolin monk was talking about is it's not about taking force, it's like bouncing off. And that is the point, right? Like all the body conditioning stuff, it's not about just standing there like a brick and
Like a dummy, yeah.
right? It's about like coordinating your breath and creating this kind of like a like the uh, like the airbag in a car when that explosion, you have this expansion and force bounces off of you like a big rubber ball, right? And that's really the essence of a lot of the iron body training. And there was John Zhuang, there was standing post training, there was a whole bunch of different, like what we call the Fuju Gongfa, these supplemental exercises that a lot of these aspects of the training, like Yang Shifu considered these all like closed door practices that that like only show these to like closest disciples and all this kind of stuff. And that it's a really meaty training. It's pretty intense and and one of the cool things is that he would show you how you do it when you're just a beginner, and he would show you like a progression as you get more physically able, like always constantly up leveling the training, right? And it's kind of like a lot of the stuff that I learned like in my 30s with him and 40s, like I can't do anymore. Like, but I do versions of them that I can do, and it works like really good physical therapy. Like there's a lot of really cool training that I learned from him that like I've had students that are literally like physical therapists and they're like, oh my God, I'm using this with my clients because it's really great training and all the emphasis on fascia building connective tissue and it's like the root of the training that we did. So Yang Shifu would really emphasize it, he would emphasize you know what he would tell you like think what are you doing, always think what are you doing, like in the forms, don't just like memorize your routine and just like do it. He would really like he was such a stickler on like his expression was Hua Chuan Shao Tui, like, and that was a rip, like a flower fist embroidered leg, like just like showy martial arts. He would be like, that's not real Bagua.